As time goes on, I find more and more Magic the Gathering players are getting into Pauper. It's such a fantastic format, and I might be a little bit biased because, you know what, I love the format myself. But I think because of the variety of interactions and actual really good card selection that you get in the format, you can do anything to your heart's desire, and you generally can find an analog to many decks that you're playing in any other constructed format. Today, I wanted to take an opportunity to talk to you about 3 decks that I think can change the way you view the Pauper format itself and give you a little bit of diversity in terms of what you can actually attempt and succeed with in this format. Now, if you're going to look at the timestamps below, it should inform you that we're going to take this discussion to a diversity and power level standpoint at first, and then I'm going to be going to the decks themselves. So definitely, if you're not here for that beginning discussion, take a look at that decks. It's all going to be in the timestamps, and if you like what you're seeing, please like and comment on the video and share it out. Hopefully we can spread the love for the Pauper format. Now, I wanted to start this discussion out with a very prolific member of the Pauper community. His name's Alex Hullman, and if you aren't aware of him and you're playing Pauper, I don't know what you're doing. The guy's been really spearheading a lot of the Pauper content, writes a bunch of articles on Channel Fireball, and is a part of the Pauper panel. So if you're looking for Pauper content, he is one of the many fantastic Pauper community members out there that's making content and pushing forward. And the discussion and topic for this video today kind of came off of an article that he recently wrote. And that article is going to be linked down below. I want to take a small blurb out of it. So it's going to be from May 13th, breaking down the engines of Pauper, again written by Alex Hullman, linked down below. The first sentence says, if you take a look at the current state of things in Pauper, it's hard to ignore the fact that the format is currently dominated by 3 macro strategies: Affinity, Boros, and Fairies. Now, the article goes very deep into the concept of Pauper engines, how they overlap in the tier strategies, and really breaks them down. So this article is a fantastic read. I highly recommend it, but that first sentence has a lot of truth to it. If you look at the Pauper metagame itself, it's dominated by the Izzet Dimir Fairies, the Boros Monarch and aggro lists, and Affinity. There is Mardu Affinity, there's Grixis Affinity, personally, my personal love being Grixis Affinity, that takes over that metagame. But that doesn't mean that, like Alex is talking about in these engines, that certain engines in the Pauper format can't proliferate and create other strategies. And that's really what we're going to go into with these top 3 decks. There is a lot of diversity in the Pauper format. You're going to be looking at strategies like Bogles being tier 1, Burn being tier 1. There is a pure Storm deck in Cycle Storm, and there are a lot of ways to attack this metagame at the league level. At the competitive level, you do have to make some changes into what you're hoping to come up against and attack, but realistically, you can play almost anything and succeed in this format. Looking at this archetype itself, or sorry, the metagame itself, you're going to see decks like Mono Black Devotion, Mono Blue Tempo, Mono White Heroic, as I mentioned, Bogles. There's a combo deck in Goblins. Tron, for all you modern players, exists in this format in many ways. Tempo decks like Delver and Dimir Fairies are very analogous there. There's a lot of things that you can do in this format, which is why I think this video is going to be really helpful to you if you're looking for something off the beaten path. Now let's venture into the unknown and talk about those 3 decks. First and foremost, we have Walls Combo. That's right, it's a deck made up of literally walls, cards with Defender. How would you combo off with a deck like this? Well, in a lot of ways, it can feel slow. You're not actually attacking, but it's a combo deck that at its basic root, right, one of the most basic combos in the deck itself, takes Axebane Guardian along with many of the defenders on the battlefield and creates X mana of any combination. So you're not stuck to just creating white, just creating blue, just creating green. You can create any combination where X is the number of creatures with Defender. Okay, so you create a bunch of mana. Then you create at least 1 blue to untap Axebane Defender. And then you create a swath of mana, you create a bunch of mana, and you can sink it into something like Valak Invoker. Now that seems a little bit simple, right? Like you ramp out, you play these defenders, you protect yourself against aggro, and then you combo off. The reason I really want to mention this deck is there are some really fun win conditions in here that you can come up with in terms of just sinking a bunch of mana into. Valak Invoker is a really cool one. The next one is going to be Secret Door. It's going to be one of my favorite reasons to actually try this deck and play this deck. You can win through just venturing into the dungeon. Remember the dungeon mechanic that literally is turning Commander in many constructed formats, or well, people thought so, into just a board game? It's kind of weird in a lot of sense when you think about it in terms of Magic, but dungeons are really cool. You do only get the ability to activate this in terms of a sorcery, so you can't respond to a combat spell and then go through the dungeon, but it doesn't matter. It's still a really cool way to win. So if you're looking to win off of the beaten path and try something new and get an excuse to just buy dungeons and put them into your deck, come on. Walls combo in Pauper is going to be where you want to be. Next up, we have Red-Black Sacrifice, a deck that looks to take advantage of an engine that Alex Hullman is talking about, the engine in the Sacrifice engine, as well as powerful cards like Deadly Dispute to take advantage of a tempo sacrifice aggro type of deck to bring a lot of things together and find the win. You have cards like Carrion Feeder. Very simple. For many of you that have played other constructed formats like Modern, Legacy, whatever, you'll see cards like Carrion Feeder. You've seen this before, especially coming out of Modern Horizons. Carrion Feeder has been legal in Modern. Sacrifice a bunch of creatures, put a 1/1 counter on it. It can't block. It's an aggro creature. Past that, you have Sacrifice Fodder like Dragon Egg that creates 2/2s when it dies. Fantastic. And then you have powerful cards that come along with it that you'll see in other strategies like Affinity, such as Deadly Dispute. Now, you're not sacrificing artifacts, although there are artifact lands in the deck. You can sacrifice, obviously, your creatures to then ramp yourself, draw more cards, and then there are many other ways to draw cards in the deck. It's a deck that churns through and finds the win. Now, notably, the most recent addition to this deck is out of New Capenna, and that's Body Dropper. Coming in at 2 mana, creating Menace, and then whenever another creature gets sacrificed, it gets a 1/1 on it. So this is a great way to create a wide board. So if you have other creatures that are being sacrificed that are dying, you don't necessarily need to do that at the same time with Body Dropper. If your Carrion Feeder is growing, so is your Body Dropper, and it's a fantastic mana sink for a little bit of extra mana, and that extra creature that you have, you can sacrifice it, give it Menace as a way to get around that one Mer Enforcer, that one Gurmag Angler. Don't get away from how powerful combat tricks are in evasion tactics. Flying is very powerful in the format. Why can't Menace be as well? Finally, the last deck that I think is worth talking about here is, as a mill player, I have to bring this up because in my opinion, this is the Pauper mill deck of the format. It's Turbo Fog. Turbo Fog is probably one of the most evil decks that you can play in this format, and it's one of the most miserable decks that you can play against in the format. So pick your poison on keeping your friends when you're playing this in Paper or in MTGO, but the basic tenet of this deck is that you're going to use fog effects like Moment's Peace to prevent all combat damage. Remember that Pauper is a very board-heavy format, using a lot of creature combat tricks, and tempo-based elements in the format to outvalue your opponent and get them from 20 to 0. So you fog that away. While you're fogging away, you got a lot of extra mana. What are you going to do with it? You're going to draw some cards. Cool. What are you drawing into? Well, a little bit of ramp, right? You might as well play out your lands. You might as well draw more cards. So we're doing a lot of things. We're stopping our opponent. We're ramping. We're drawing. Where's the payoff? Stream of Thought. 1 mana to get target player to mill 4 cards from their library. It can be yourself, which is important, or milling your opponent, where you then get the ability to shuffle 4 cards, up to 4 cards. It can be 0, it can be 1, 2, 3, or 4 cards from your graveyard back into your library. So you kind of see where I'm going with this. You can then replicate, you can have extra mana that you've ramped into, you've drawn into those lands, you put them on the battlefield. You can then use that extra mana to replicate this, copy this as many times as possible, to then get your opponent to mill out, and then shuffle back the fogs that you use, the card draw spells that you use back in your library, so that you're not drawing lands. You're only drawing the cards that you want to, and then Stream of Thought over and over again. But wait, Shaft, I've cast Stream of Thought. What do I do? I'm not going to have multiple copies of this. Wait a second. When you draw your second Stream of Thought, you can shuffle back in your first Stream of Thought. There you go. Fog, draw, ramp, mill. Come on. What more could you ask for in life? Come on. Magic the Gathering, Pauper, coming together with some of the most evil things that you can do in the Pauper metagame. Now, those are the top 3 decks that I would recommend, and I think going off of the beaten path is where you want to be. The format itself lends itself to diversity. As that article mentions, there are a lot of baseline engines, and the reason as Alex mentions in the article, that a lot of these top tier decks exist is they use overlapping engines to come together. That doesn't mean that you can't use strategies like this that I mentioned that already have existing engines, maybe tweak a little, add your own engines to it, but they have their own synergies and micro strategies in them that lend itself to being powerful, especially a deck like Turbo Fog. I'm mentioning because it's actually placing really high in the recent Pauper challenges. It's been making a very big comeback. If you wanted to check it out, I got some games on my channel as well, so definitely check that out. But the archetypes are powerful. Many things that you do in Pauper are powerful as long as you're playing the powerful cards. And heck, the powerful cards are like literal pennies. This is not an expensive format. Get in there, get some decks going, build a battle box or whatever. You can get so many of the decks here with like the cheapest rental services, the cheapest subscription on rental services, get all the cards you want. So hopefully you enjoyed the decks that I showed here, and hopefully you can give Pauper a bit of a try, dive into a little bit more. If you like what you're seeing, please leave a like and a comment, as I mentioned, and follow for more Pauper content. As a modern mill player, I do a little bit of Pauper on the side, so show it some love. And I hope you remember that even the impossible is possible. And as we ponder that thought, I hope you join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.